Yes, we can hear you.
Balina mai me ke aloha kākou a pau. On behalf of the ACLU Hawaii, the Matsunaga Institute on Peace and Justice, and Ekolu Mea Nui, I welcome our panelists and the audience to this candidate forum for our next Honolulu Prosecutor. My name is Dr. Jamie Mahealani Miller. I am the co-founder of Ekolu Mea Nui, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the transforming Hawaii's criminal justice system through a Native Hawaiian framework and implementation of Native Hawaiian practices throughout the continuum: prevention, intervention, and reintegration. We are in a time of tremendous change. We all know and have experienced the constant change, but this tremendous change I am referring to, we Native Hawaiians have a term for: hulihia. Hulihia is defined as a complete change, to turn upside down. In this generation, hulihia is more relevant than ever as we navigate through the issues of human rights, systemic racism, food insecurity, houselessness, poverty, along with opportunities such as new economic industries for Hawaii. We've all recently heard that public trust in the prosecutor's office is of grave concern. We know that this office has great influence and power in justice reform. As we address and adapt to our new realities, the system and those representing the system will need to adapt, change, and be part of the hulihia necessary for all. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kamana'opono Crab. Dr. Crab has focused his personal, academic, and professional career toward improving Native Hawaiian well-being. He sits on several high-level policy and governing boards around the world and locally, including Ekolu Mea Nui. He has authored many articles and conducted research relevant to Native Hawaiian history, resilience, and current social issues. He is a founding member of Ahakane, a 15-year-old organization dedicated to the well-being of Native Hawaiian men, a licensed clinical psychologist and current CEO of Kohala Institute. He also serves his community as a ho'oponopono practitioner, an expert in awa ceremony and Hawaiian protocol, an experienced chanter as well. He will present our Oli Aina, or offering to displace Hawaii Ne, this evening. Dr. Crab.
Mahalo, Jamie. Hey ala e na kamai na o tapai moku e. Hey ala e na kamakolo kolo hai o tala hui e. Hey ala e na kamai a kamahilu ilu kamakala ihi e. Hey ala e na kamamaia o tapa ihi he oli I kolo manu e. Hey ala e aulula houlula kamana e. Hulu tai ewe ala ola ai tamana o na moku o na kahiko e. Heyo olono nui a kea. Heyo e na kipikoa o liloa. Haulu I tamotua kui Hawaii. Heyo e ihi kapala o maewa. Heyo e na kama o kamalalawalu. Haulu I tamotua kui maui. Heyo e kanaloa. Heyo e na puko o tamoana. Haulu I tamotua kui ka ho'olawe. Eyo e kalai pahoa. Eyo e na alai nui a hina. Haulu I tamotua kui molokai. Eyo e lana I hale. Eyo e na kalau au ka ulala au. Haulu I tamotua kui lana I. Iyo e lalo wai ea. Iyo e na uhi o kaku I hewa. Haulu I tamotua kui o wahu. Iyo e kamawai lua lani. Iyo e na me e o kau moali. Haulu I tamotua kui kauai. Iyo e kaunu. Eyo e na moa kakala o kalala kea. Haului te motua kui ni I hau. Eyo e hawa I ka mole o ka honua. Heyo e hawa I o ka piko a kanaka. Eyo e hawa I o te pai moku ola. Ola hawa I nui a kea. Ola hawa I kua uli. Eyo ola hawa I o kalani o wā kea. He ola no e ola no. Aloha.
Mahalo nui ka mana'opono for helping us acknowledge our kua'ana, our elder sibling, this aina, and setting the foundation for this forum. Our moderator this evening is Jen Jenkins, a public policy advocate. Jen is a graduate of the William S. Richardson School of Law. Their policy work focuses on homelessness and transforming the justice system in Hawaii, where they is very active in the community. Please welcome Jen.
Thank you, Jamie and Kamana'o. We're here because the prosecutor is one of the most powerful people in Honolulu County. The prosecutor chooses whether or not to charge someone with a crime and which crimes to prosecute. They influence state and local laws, and they decide who gets a second chance and who will face the possibility of prison. The choice of the next prosecutor will have a long-lasting impact on our families and communities. For decades, the prosecutor's office has been a major force in driving incarceration, resulting in disproportionate prison sentences, especially for people of color and poor people, and sending people with addiction, disabilities, and mental illness into jails and prisons instead of supporting them with treatment and social services. Today, though we look forward to what is possible, these candidates want your vote, and you need to decide if they deserve it. Our goal is to challenge the candidates you see in front of you to reshape our community and our criminal legal system for the good of us all. We will do this by asking them to discuss how they think and where they stand on issues like reducing mass incarceration, reducing racial bias in our criminal legal system, transparency, and accountability. If you want more information about the ACLU of Hawaii or to read the candidates' previous responses to our survey, go to acluhi.org. That's acluhi.org. We will put the link in the chat box. Due to time constraints, we will not be able to answer audience questions in real time. Instead, we solicited questions from registered participants leading up to the candidate forum. Thank you for your submissions. We chose 2 questions from registered participants to be included in tonight's forum. These questions were directed at all candidates. Now we are going to review the rules and introduce the candidates running for Honolulu Prosecutor who are with us this evening. Here are the straightforward rules. There are 5 main questions to start with, and 5 main questions, 3 questions, you'll have a minute each to respond. And 2 of the questions, you'll have 2 minutes each to respond. With limited time and to keep things running smoothly, we will not have time for candidate rebuttals, and each candidate's mic will be muted until it's their turn to speak. We will use an internal timer, and we're going to try to stick to schedule to get through all our questions we have planned for this evening. 10 seconds before your time is up, you'll hear a single bell. If you go over time by 10 seconds, you'll hear a double bell, and we'll mute you so you can move on to the next candidate or question. We ask that you answer each question directly. If I do not feel you've answered the question, I'll follow up with you. The order that candidate answers questions were chosen at random. The candidates joining us today are Stephen Alm, RJ Brown, Jackie Esser, Megan Kao, Tai Kim, and Dwight Nadamoto. We also invited the Honolulu Prosecutor candidate, Anosh Shaku, but never received a response. We will begin with each candidate getting an opening statement. You each have 1 minute, and first is Stephen Ong.
Good evening. This election is first and foremost about restoring trust to the prosecutor's office, and I believe I am the best candidate to do that. I will bring a culture of high ethical standards and of doing justice, not just winning cases. I have the credibility and supervisory experience to do that because I was both a felony team captain and the director of a division when I worked at that office. I then ran the U.S. Attorney's office, and then I was a judge for 15 years, supervising deputy prosecutors, deputy public defenders, and defense counsel. This election is also about who can work with others to reduce crime, and that's working with the community. And I did that when I was United States Attorney, working with everybody in Kalihi, Palama, and Chinatown to reduce crime there by over 70% in 3 years. This is no time for on-the-job training about how to be a supervisor or a manager. I can hit the ground running on day one, and I hope to get the chance to do that, to clean up the office and get it back on track. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next is Megan Cow.
Oh, aloha. My name is Megan Cow. Thank you for having me tonight. I greatly appreciate the invite. I realize that this audience is looking for someone that's going to take reform and move extremely quickly forward. But my position is that a prosecutor's job and kuleana is to objectively apply the criminal laws to everyone and anyone that violates that law. There can be no bias, there can be no special interest, and a prosecutor certainly cannot use his or her position to foster or to forward a personal goal. That leads to corruption, which is where we are at right now. If any prosecutor promises to not charge a certain class of people or not charge a certain type of crime, that's exactly what leads to corruption. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have RJ Brown.
Aloha and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, to the viewers. Thank you to the ACLU for having us on tonight. You know, I found that with each of these forums that we do, they've all got a kind of a different feel and a different flavor. My expectation is that tonight we're going to talk about some difficult things, and I think that's it's going to be valuable, not just for the people tuning in here, but for us fellow candidates, because ultimately someone is going to be elected, and that person has a big job ahead of them. There is so much polarization in the country right now, and there are so many shrill voices. My hope is that tonight is going to be respectful, and the dialogue is going to be thorough, and then ultimately we come up with some good solutions about how we can move things forward in Honolulu.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Tai Kim. Please be sure to unmute yourself.
Okay. Hello, this is Tai Kim. I'm running on the premise that there is no foundation with public safety. People need to be informed of what's happening in criminal justice system, not just with the police officers or prosecutors, but the other parts as well. Generally speaking, there are 4 parts of criminal justice system: law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, and prison system. People need to be aware of what's going on, what's happening, what the processes are for each parts of the criminal justice systems, because law enforcement cannot achieve public safety alone. We have to all work together, and the foundation is people being informed. Currently, we have no foundation. People are not aware of what's happening in criminal prosecution and criminal justice systems altogether. I'm running on the basis that we need to inform the public, work together, and find a solution together. Thank you. Aloha.
Thank you. Next is Dwight Nadamoto.
Aloha. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been a prosecutor for over 30 years. I prosecuted white-collar murder, corruption, and sex trafficking cases. One of the cases I prosecuted involved a Honolulu police officer who was the leader of a burglary ring in Hawaii Kai, and he targeted that area. I did that trial and I argued the case before the Hawaii Supreme Court and won. One of my focuses in office today is domestic violence. I've hired the premier expert of domestic violence prosecution in the United States. He has been working with my deputies for over a year. His methods have been adopted by the federal government, and he has taught prosecutors how to prosecute these cases throughout the United States. He is currently an adjunct professor at Columbia University Law School. Working with him, the legislature, and another of my deputies, we have been trying to pass a bill to make domestic violence prosecutions easier. Unfortunately, because of the current situation, it may not pass, but we are hopeful that it will pass next year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And finally, we have Jackie Esser.
Aloha, my name is Jackie Esser. I am a career public defender. I'm running for prosecutor to end mass incarceration. As a public defender, I've seen how prosecutors have been destroying lives, families, and communities, wasting millions of our dollars and failing to make us safe. It's time we invest in our communities and education and stop investing in our jails and prisons. Mass incarceration has caused generational trauma and harm to our most poor, our Native Hawaiians, and communities of color. We absolutely can create a more fair and just system by ending cash bail, by treating mental illness and substance use disorder, stop punishing it, stop criminalizing our houseless and start providing services, demanding equal enforcement of the law, and truly supporting crime victims by focusing on healing the harm that crime causes and offering restorative justice. I have been fighting for these things my entire legal career, and I will continue to do so as your prosecutor.
Thank you. We're now going to move to candidate questions. This evening, we will have several questions from people who have been affected by the criminal legal system in the state of Hawaii and the decisions of the prosecutor. The first question will be asked by Dr. Jamie Miller. You each will have 2 minutes to respond. And please remember to unmute yourself when you're called upon.
Of 10 years for an automobile accident. I'm not making light of the situation. His friend lost his life. Yet this was my son's very first offense. He was 19 years old and in his first year of college. As of today, his sentence has been the harshest in the history of Hawaii in comparison to like charges. These past 9 years of being in the current justice system have been traumatic and painful for my son. From being excessively sentenced, sent 5,000 miles away, separated from his family because he is incarcerated in Saguaro, Arizona, housed with extremely violent gangs and career criminals, and denied parole 8 times despite being labeled a model inmate. It's not just he who suffers, we suffer, and the community suffers. Through these painful experiences, I have learned firsthand how and why our current justice system is failing. Like many systemic issues in our state of Hawaii, the criminal justice one continues to perpetuate institutional racism for Native Hawaiians, overcrowding because of excessive arrests, fiscal carelessness, high rates of recidivism, corruption, slave labor, and reinforces an intergenerational cycle of incarceration, all at the expense of us, you and I, the taxpayers, to the tune of $226 million annually and rising. But there is hope, hulihia, and it starts with the Office of the Prosecutor. The Justice Reform Task Force recommended Hawaii to transform from a punitive to a restorative state. It adopted a vision statement that is rooted in Hawaiian cultural values. This makes a lot of sense because restorative justice is modeled after our Hawaiian culture and the practice of ho'oponopono. 35 states, not Hawaii, have already adopted restorative justice legislation, and their data shows a decrease in recidivism between 20 to 55%. Victims report a 99% satisfaction rate after participating in these methods. Restorative justice promotes healing and reduces repeat offenses. Restorative justice saves $8 for every $1 spent. Our current system focuses on punishment. It breaks people down and perpetuates cycles of trauma. A transformed system of hulihia would have prevention, intervention, and re-entry practices focused on healing, thereby building people up and keeping communities safe. Tax dollars well spent. The Honolulu Prosecutor has a huge part of how safety is shaped in the community. What is prosecuted and what is not prosecuted. This position also has the immediate power to exercise real reform and end mass incarceration. How? First, using appropriate judgment that requires empathy, followed by actions to divert people from entering the criminal justice system, rather into programs that provide healing. I firmly believe that if the prosecutor in my son's case was interested in him as a person that made the worst mistake of his life and recognized that he needed healing more than a cage, the outcome would have been different for him, for us, and for our community. This is my question. Do you believe that justice is served through the measurement of prosecutorial wins by the number of convictions or the harshness of the sentence?
Thank you, Jamie. Tai Kim, you're up first.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you for the question. I don't believe prosecutor's job is all convictions. It's not all about convictions. Definitely not all about convictions. Prosecutor's job, first and foremost, is public safety. And public safety can be achieved a lot further with prevention and rehabilitation and treatment rather than conviction. We don't need more cages without any kind of plan. We don't need more spaces in prison or more prison buildings without a plan. Sagoro, as a question had mentioned, is one of 125 prison facilities in the country. It's a business, it's a big corporation. What does prison system offers? We call it corrections, Halava Correctional Facility, Oahu Correctional Facility. What part of correction is being offered by these facilities? We need to focus on prevention. We need to focus on rehabilitations. It's not all about conviction. Now, criminal justice system has 4 parts. It's not just law enforcement, it's not just the prosecutor, as I said, judges and prison system. Each must be held accountable for their action. Are they doing their job? Are they being accountable for their misconduct, their actions, their inactions? We need to recognize within each part that there is a systemic prejudices, biases. To say that there isn't one, it's to say that we don't have opinions, that there is no socioeconomic disparity. There is one. It's deep-rooted in every part of our criminal justice system. We have to fight it. We have to recognize it. As a prosecutor, I will have the deputies be cognizant of it and be aware. And each individual cases will not be simply be win-win-win, convictions, convictions, convictions. Accountability starts with each part of the criminal justice system. Now, having said all of that, responsible behavior is not a choice, but accountability is. Responsible behavior, is a choice. You can be responsible to behave responsibly or not, but accountability is not a choice. There has to be accountability with every law that's broken.
Okay, thank you. And next is RJ Brown.
Jamie, I apologize. I missed the first 10 or 15 seconds of your question, or like the initial explanation portion. The short answer is that absolutely not. Whoever is elected next, the culture of the prosecutor's office cannot be one that is balanced upon wins and losses. You cannot have deputies operating under the presumption that they're going to be rewarded, that they're going to be valued within the prosecutor's office by the type of conviction rate they have and whether or not they've been successful at trial. The role of the prosecutor in every facet and every way is to do what's right. Whatever the deputies are doing, their job and their role is to expose truth and make sure that we're having just outcomes. I do believe in the value of accountability. And I believe in the value of accountability, not because I have not because I enjoy asking for tough sentences on occasion, or because I enjoy seeing people go to prison. I don't. But I think accountability can oftentimes benefit a defendant in the same way that it can benefit a victim. I believe that a prosecutor, while our job is to evaluate evidence and to make charging decisions and ultimately prosecute cases ethically and effectively, a prosecutor can do a great deal of good for both victims and defendants. And when you're talking about, I don't know the particulars of your son's case, and so I'm not making any comment on that. But I absolutely believe from the bottom of my soul that we can bring a little bit more empathy and compassion to this process, and that the system as it's set up, where you look at defendants as if they are this other and they really are just a number, it is easy to get trapped and sucked into the mentality that you've just taken this black and white perspective and this is just another individual who's committed an act and there's a state of mind and we have the evidence meet the law and we do our job that way. I would like to get away from that. I would like to have individual defendants have their circumstances understood by the deputy. I would like to have deputies, and if elected, I will make sure that I have deputies that are taking into account every situation, every defendant's circumstances, so that we can achieve good, just outcomes at the end of the day.
Thank you. Next, we have Dwight Nadamoto.
Quite definitely it's not measured by wins and losses. The duty of a prosecutor is to protect the public and to do justice. What that means is that we have to take recognition of the victim. We take into account much of what the victim, says and does. We're not talking about wins and losses. We protect the victim as much as possible. For instance, if we have a sex assault case and the victim or they want to go forward, but we find out that the victim is suicidal, she's tried to commit suicide 2 or 3 times, we will naturally try and, deal this case, so to speak, to prevent the victim from getting any more pain. So, we don't look at wins and losses. We look at what is best for the victim, what is best for everybody. And that's what we do.
Thank you. Next, we have Megan Cow.
Aloha, Jamie. I also missed the first part of your presentation. I think there was something wrong technically, but I did hear the majority of it. I am sorry for your circumstance. I don't know your son's case. I don't know anything about it. And so I cannot comment on that. However, my answer to your question is no. No prosecutor that I know, and I know the majority of the deputies in that office now, and I know RJ Brown, who was most recently a deputy prosecutor in that office, and no deputy that I know measures his or her success by a win-loss rate or by the length of incarceration that is given at sentencing. What I believe is that the majority of the prosecutors in that office, including RJ Brown, believe that if they get a guilty verdict, justice has prevailed because 12 people from the community has found that person guilty. On the other hand, I honestly believe that the majority of the deputies that are in that office today believe that if they get a not guilty verdict, that justice has prevailed because 12 people from our community have spoken and have found that person not guilty. And I don't believe that any of the deputies that are in there now measure their success by a win-loss rate. I believe that the people that are claiming this or that say this are people who have never been a deputy prosecuting attorney before or who have not been in that office for more than 20 years. And that's not the way this office is run. When I was there under Peter Carlisle, we did not measure our success by that rate. The award that Peter would give was a matter of, thank you, I heard the bell.
Thank you. Next, we have Stephen Aum.
Yes, first and foremost, you have to create a culture of ethics and doing justice at the prosecutor's office, and it all flows from there. Second, it's training and teaching the deputies to identify who are the truly violent and dangerous folks, and in many cases send them to prison. But that is probably 30% of the people at sentencing. That means the vast majority can and should be placed on probation and use proven programs like drug court, like mental health court, like Hope Probation to help people succeed. Even when they do get sent to prison, the statute should be amended to allow for good times so people have incentives to get out early. And what's sad is our local prison system has almost no programs. I've talked to inmates who'd rather do their time in Saguaro because they have a lot of programs there. That's wrong. You also need to change the statutes. I was head of the Penal Code Review Committee 4 years ago, and we got rid of the mandatory minimums for selling a $20 bag of meth. It used to be 10 years in prison. Now it's discretionary with the judge. We got rid of the mandatory minimum for possession of a small amount of drugs. Research is clear, treatment works better on the outside than the inside. And the last case I handled at the prosecutor's office was a woman who was sole caretaker for her mother who had Alzheimer's disease. She ended up smothering her. I read her diary. She had a mental health, she had a mental breakdown. I went to see Keith and I told him, this should be manslaughter, not murder. He said, it has to be murder. I said, well, you find somebody else to do it. Eventually, he found another deputy who did the case. Jury came back in 15 minutes with manslaughter. So some of the cases you don't charge are the ones that should be lessers are the important ones to do. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Jackie Esser.
Thank you, Jamie, for sharing your story. That and I'm sorry that your family is going through that. That story is the same story that really wears you down as a public defender, and is the same stories that I would see, which made me decide a year ago that I'm either perpetuating this system of violence or I'm going to do something about it. And the measure of success at a prosecutor's office absolutely can never be based on convictions. It has been, and it still is to this day. Deputies are promoted by their number of convictions. Under Carlisle's administration, they had the Top Gun Award, where you would have a big badge on your wall, and if you got a conviction. So it is their culture, and it needs to change. Under my administration, we will start, our measure of success will be on how we are healing the harm that crime causes victims, because we know hurt people, as well as how well we're doing on rates of recidivism. And we can do that in a number of ways. As far as recidivism rates, your success will be measured on whether or not you help a person transition out of the criminal legal system, holding people accountable, but also know that people are more than their worst act, and all people can become contributing members of our community. And people, when they are sentenced to prison, we don't just wash our hands and that's it. We have to really, prosecutors need to be advocating for prison reform and working with the community on re-entry. So on day one of someone's arrest, we're already focused on how we're helping them transition. And then as far as crime victims, right now, victims are used as a means to get a conviction, and that's it. They're not provided any type of meaningful support. And so we need to collaborate with community-based services and provide victims and offer restorative practice options if that's what they want to do, because not all victims want to participate in a trial. Right now, prosecutors will ask for bench warrants if they don't come to court. That is just perpetuating the crime, and that needs to.
Thank you, everyone. The next two questions come directly from the audience. First, under the leadership of Keith Kaneshiro, the Honolulu Prosecutor's Office has faced increased public scrutiny and distrust over ethics concerns. Endorsements by SHAPO, the State Police Officers Union, is an inherent conflict of interest and raises ethical concerns of its own. Will you swear off any endorsement or campaign contributions from SHAPO or other related law enforcement associations? You have 1 minute, and Stephen you're first.
Hi, I was proud to get the SHAPO endorsement. A number of my challengers here sought it as well. But that's because the police are the ones who bring most of the cases to the prosecutor's office. They're the ones you're going to be working with. They trusted me to do the right thing. And they did that knowing that I was the only candidate who had actually prosecuted police officers for the most serious of crimes. When I was the United States Attorney, we prosecuted Honolulu police officers for civil rights violations and for corruption. So I'm a totally independent person. They know I'm strong. I've been at this for years. It's not going to affect my decision-making. And if police officers are committing criminal acts when I'm Honolulu prosecutor, we will prosecute them as well. So no, I'm not. I also got endorsements from 9 other unions, including the carpenters, the bricklayers, the masons, the ironworkers, the laborers. They're all over our community, and the Teamsters, because they recognize I'm going to help their members stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Megan Cow with 1 minute.
To answer your question, I have not and I will not take any money from SHOPO. The president of SHOPO completely endorsed Louis Kealoha up until the conviction, promised the community that Louis Kealoha did nothing wrong, and stood by him the entire time. The current president of SHOPO is very good friends with Louis Kealoha and Catherine Kealoha, and has decided to endorse Steve for this race. And as such, I will not and I have not taken any money from Shopo.
Thank you. Next, we have Jackie Esser.
I never sought the endorsement of Shopo like everyone else here because there is an inherent conflict of interest when law enforcement unions and their associations pay their prosecutor money to get them elected. I also took a pledge and I called upon every single candidate to not accept money from law enforcement associations and unions. I also contacted the Hawaii State Bar and asked them to propose a rule to not allow any candidate for Honolulu Prosecutor to accept money. There is an inherent conflict of interest. Prosecutors work with police officers every single day to prove cases. They work together. You cannot ask that prosecutor to then look at the police, the same very police officer they need to get this conviction into whether or not there's misconduct and ask them to prosecute. It doesn't happen, and we see that because police aren't prosecuted. Steve Alm talked about when he was U.S. attorney. That is he's doing his job prosecuting county police officers. It would mean something if he was prosecuting federal officers. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is there's this independent.
Thank you. Next, we have Dwight Nadamoto.
You know, I don't have any problem with Steve getting Shopo's endorsement. I mean, that's up to Shopo. You know, I think that the problem is not, you know, I have no doubt if Steve is elected, he would prosecute police officers as I did. I would think if anything, it's more of an appearance of impropriety, but I don't doubt that Steve would prosecute police officers. We have, and we continue to prosecute them. That's all.
Thank you. Next, we have Tai Kim.
Thank you. Hello. You know, the appearance of impropriety has to be eliminated from a public office. This is an elected public office, one of only criminal justice system that's elected by the people. I have not sought, I'm not seeking any establishment's endorsement, any union endorsement, any politician's endorsement. Appearance of impropriety has to be out. How can you represent the people at the same time be on the shoulders with these unions, these politicians, these establishments? That's a no-no. This is an elected office. We represent fairness that applies to everybody, rich, poor, strong and weak. So there has to be no appearance of impropriety. Thank you.
Thank you. Next and last is RJ Brown.
So I do tend to agree that, well, first of all, I never sought Shopo's endorsement. I, like Mr. Kim, have not sought out any labor organization or other type of organizations of endorsement in any way. I do believe that there is something unique and special about the nature of the prosecutor, that the individual has to be completely independent and separate from any influence that may ultimately come if you are being supported by something like Shopo. That said, I would echo Mr. Nadamoto's comment that, you know, while I think it is best not to have these endorsements, I have no doubt that Judge Alm, if ultimately he is elected, it's not going to impact his decision to do the right thing if he needs to prosecute an officer.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, incarceration is brutal, costly, and doesn't address the reasons why people commit crime, driving people to reoffend, making our communities less safe. As prosecutor, you would have the power to enact policies that would prioritize diversion programs and alternatives to jails and prisons. If elected as prosecutor, name 2 to 3 specific policies that you would implement within your office to prioritize diversion and alternatives to jails and prisons. You each have 1 minute, and Jackie Esser is first.
Violence perpetuates violence, and incarceration is a form of violence. So a prosecutor has to use their discretion and keep people out of our system who do not need to be there. And so services is number 1, and you can do that. And before diversion, we want to be providing services to people. If someone needs mental health treatment or substance use treatment, then we want to provide that service on day one and not rely on our jails as a de facto mental health or a substance use treatment program. And we can do that in a number of ways. First, if someone is arrested for being in the park after hours because they have nowhere else to go, instead of charging an offense and having them sit in our jail until they plead guilty just to be released to the same situation the next block over, the prosecutor can work with community-based services and provide services on day one. They never have to go through that violence. We will be providing long-term solutions. We will be stabilizing people instead of destabilizing people. And we can also do that through pretrial reform. It will be under my administration. Prosecutors will never.
Thank you, Jackie. Next, we have Dwight Nadamoto.
You know, I've always been in favor of drug court. We have drug court going right now. We have mental health court, we have veterans court. Those type of courts I think are valuable. They're usually meant for only people who are nonviolent. And I would like to kind of expand those things. You know, I would like to make drug court and various versions of mental health court possibly available to juveniles. Because I think we have to start earlier with these type of diverging programs. That's all.
Thank you. Next, we have Megan Cao.
The policy that I would implement is to allow diversion programs. For example, Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center's Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Honolulu program, also known as LEAD, L-E-A-D, because diversion programs are very important and treatment is always the better answer. However, I will be clear that people that violate the diversion program or violate probation, we will seek jail time or prison time for those offenders.
Thank you. Next, we have Tai Kim.
Thank you. You know, I would echo Dwight's comment about expanding our program. You know, currently there isn't enough bed space for people wanting help. I mean, people actually wanting help. I mean, there are individuals that just want to get into a program just to stay out of jail, just to stay on probation and not get the long-term sentencing that individual deserves. But there are many, many individuals that needs help, and help has to be available. Now, currently there are very many programs that are available that we need to expand on. One bed space is not enough for 20 who's wanting help. So we need to expand the current treatment facilities, mental health facilities, and other counseling programs that's available to the people that really needs help. Hello.
Thank you. And next we have Steve On.
Yes, I totally agree with what you're saying, and I've been doing it my whole career. As U.S. Attorney, when we did the Weed and Seed program in Chinatown, it reduced crime by more than 70% in 3 years. That means 7,600 misdemeanors down to 2,400, 3,000 felonies down to 750. That means thousands of people not victimized, and just as important, thousands of people not arrested and brought into the criminal justice system. Once they're in there, we have drug court, mental health court, hope probation. I was the drug court judge, and we increased the numbers in there from 127 to 197. In hope probation, compared to regular probation, they get arrested for new crimes 55% less often, and they go to prison half as often. In addition, Native Hawaiians get their probation revoked and go to prison 35% less often in hope than in regular probation. And given that the hope judge has 2,000 people, that means hundreds of Native Hawaiians have not gone to prison. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have RJ Brown.
I've been consistent since I started this race that we have to treat mental health and addiction issues differently than we have historically. Diversion has got to become the rule, not the exception. You have got to treat where you've got a nonviolent offender that's got an addiction issue. We have an obligation, not just from a moral perspective, but also from a public safety perspective, to get these individuals the help that they need, so that there is going to be a lower likelihood of recidivism. And you know, if I am elected, the first thing that I will do is collect the deputies together and make sure that they understand that their role is to do the right thing and to get these guys help to the extent that they can. But beyond that, you've got to be able to take this forward to the legislature and to the city council, and you've got to demand the funding and the resources that we need to get additional diversion type programs and treatment options available, because right now we don't have those options sufficiently at our disposal. And so using that bully pulpit, using your position as the prosecutor and the influence that you've got, you really do have to use your influence to push the ball forward.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Astro, who has also been impacted by the criminal legal system in the state of Hawaii. You each have 2 minutes to respond.
Hello, everyone. My name is James Guyton, commonly known by my artist name, Astro Guillotine. I grew up in Pearl City with my mom and younger sister, Adina. I was an honor roll student who played outside, played video games, and wrote poems. I was never one to get in trouble with the police or cause problems. In high school, I chose to express myself through writing, recording, performing music. It's how I can speak to the world and share my story. But growing without a male figure present, I started to look for an uncle that could see my worth as a person with dreams and a drive to achieve them. What it turned out to be was I surrounded myself with people who tend to manipulate more than nurture. And at the age of 20, I was involved in an armed robbery. Upon my arraignment, I was given a $100,000 bail and sent to OCCC, where I experienced overcrowded cells, extended lockdown periods, and the cancellation of many visits due to short staff. Being that it was my first offense, I was also offered the Youthful Offender Act and was given an open 8 term. After arriving at Halava, I kept my head down, I followed rules, I stayed out of trouble, and wrote music every day. I never felt as alone and cut off in my entire life, but my older sister kept me going with letters and special visits. I saw the parole board, and despite not having any write-ups, never having been sent to the holding unit, and complying with facility rules and regulations, I was told that I was still a danger to the community and received 7 out of the 8 years, which is over 90% of my max out time for a first offense. Being cut off from my family once I was at Sagaro started to take a toll on my mental health, but my sister's continuing guidance helped me to stay true to my goal of getting out and recording music. I started to see other people getting requests of cut time approved who had write-ups and did other things. After my 4th year in Sagaro, my sister enlisted a lawyer and I submitted a request for a shortening of minimum. The prosecutor at the time still considered me to be dangerous, so my request was denied. I didn't cause any further trouble nor prove myself to be the same individual as I was on one day in my past. I've acknowledged the wrong I've done and the trauma that comes from being on both sides of a committed crime. There was no new information to say that I was still a danger and threat to the community, yet the prosecutor blocked me multiple times from a reduced minimum, judging me based on one day. That takes away from any growth that I gained to be a better human being. My question is, do you think a prosecutor should be involved in the parole process?
Thank you, Astro. Megan Kao, you're up first.
Yes, I do believe the prosecutor should be involved in the parole process. The way the system works is we have a prosecutor who fights for the victim, who represents Honolulu and our city. We have a defense attorney who represents the defendant. Their job is to protect the defendant's constitutional rights. And then we have the parole board, whose job it is to determine, based on the presentation in front of them and based on the record, to decide a minimum amount of time. The government has to be represented, and it's because it's due process and the Constitution requires it.
Thank you. Next, we have Stephen Ong.
I think we have almost a unique system in the United States, and I would try to change it. The judge should be the one giving the sentence, not the paroling authority. If the judge gives somebody 10 years in the state system, that's the maximum they can serve. The paroling authority meets after several months and they set what the minimum is. And I was the tri-chair of the Justice Reinvestment Initiative. 25% of the inmates had passed their minimums. Instead, the judge, working with defense counsel and prosecutor, many times in a plea agreement, should be able to set the sentence. And that's when the person gets released. And then the prison system will know how long they have to work with them. So instead of 10 years, it might be 5 years, it might be 3, it might be 2, based on the facts and circumstances of the individual person. And the judge is in the best position to do that because you have the victim there, you have the prosecutor there, you have the defense counsel, everybody can be heard and they can set an appropriate amount. So I think that's a better way to move forward at this point than the current system.
Thank you. Next, we have Jackie Esser.
Thank you, Astro, and thank you for sharing your story. There is a deep racism in our system, and it's helping operate the criminal justice system the way it was designed to do, which is incarcerate as many Black and brown people as possible. The prosecutor has an absolute obligation to ensure that incarceration is only for people who cannot be in community supervision. And when they are advocating for a prison sentence, there must be an impact statement and stating why there's no community-based program that can support this person, and the cost on the community, the family, and on the individual of incarceration, and also taking into the wants and the desires of the crime victim. When someone is incarcerated, sentenced to an open term, we have to allow that person to be able to transition on. Like you said, if there's no incentive for you to do well, then you're gonna just max out. And we know that when that happens, the recidivism rate, you're more likely to re-offend than not. And so we have to change the system to allow people to be able to transition on in a meaningful way once they do serve their time. And so the prosecutor has an absolute obligation to provide input on why they're seeking incarceration, and also allow that person to transition.
Thank you. Next, we have RJ Brown.
You know, as the process is currently structured, I do agree that a prosecutor should absolutely be involved in the parole process. And Astro, I appreciate you sharing what you've gone through. And obviously it seems like you spent your time in a productive way and you're here participating. And I certainly don't judge you by the act. It was obviously a mistake. You know, we're all redeemable. We are not the act. We are individuals, and we are not going to be defined by the acts and our failures, but they're out there. Now that said, I don't know the circumstances of your case, and I don't know exactly what happened, but I think you'd probably agree with me when you take a step to arm yourself and go and rob somebody. That's a catastrophic event for the victims and the people involved, and certainly they are entitled to have representation, which comes in the form of the deputy prosecuting attorney, and make sure that we are trying to express to the best of our ability the hurt that they have suffered and the damage that has been caused, and ultimately trying to advocate for what we feel is a reasonable sentence. Now, again, I'm not opining on your specific situation, but I do believe that a prosecutor should be involved to be able to represent that perspective of the victim, because it is part of the adversarial process that makes the system function. You do need competent prosecutors, you need competent defense attorneys, and you need fair and neutral judges so that you can come up with some kind of reasonable outcome ultimately. Now that said, I do agree with Judge Young. While the process as it currently is situated, I think prosecutors are necessary. I would personally like to see judges fix the sentence. I think that the judge is the person that is in the position who understands the facts the best, he understands the circumstances of the defendant the best, or she, and that they are in the best possible position to mete out a just sentence. And so that's where I'd like to see it go. But as it stands today, I think it is appropriate to have the prosecutors there.
Okay. Next, we have Tai Kim.
Hello. Let me just start by saying, there are various parts to criminal justice systems. As I said earlier, there are law enforcement, police, there are prosecutors, judges, and prison system. We all have to work in concert. We all have to work together in terms of achieving public safety. No one part can achieve public safety alone. We have to work in concert. Police and prosecutors, judges, and prison system. Having said that, in 28 years of my defense practice, I have yet to see a prosecutor sending a letter of recommendation or being present at a parole hearing recommending parole. I have never seen it. I've seen prosecutor's office always asking for the maximum, always asking for no parole. And that is something that we need to address. Now, we have to find out what type of program the individual has sought during incarceration or has been offered. And we have to work on that. Now, we need to do this in concert, and we can't do it along with the prosecutor's office being left out and having a prison system run it, because paroling authority is part of the prison system. Now, there was a talk of judges rendering a sentence and prison just following it. I'm opposed to that as well. Prison system has a voice, a part of criminal justice system, and we have to work in concert. And prosecutor's office have to look deep into individuals' parole chances. You know, what behind background information, behind his or her conviction records, and what programs he or she has sought and is available to them. That is very important. It's not just asking for the maximum. It's not just opposing the parole altogether. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, we have Dwight Nanamoto.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I've seen many instances where my deputies have gone and not asked for the maximum. You know, and I think that, you know, of course, the prosecutor should be involved in the parole hearing. I mean, the prosecutor's duty is to protect the public, and he should have a voice in it. And while I agree that the judge should set the maximum, but I think it is also important for the parole board to have a say in it also, because the parole board is going to be the one that knows exactly what the defendant has been doing to rehabilitate himself. If he has not been taking any classes, if he has not been taking any drug type of programs, the parole board should know about that. And that occurs after the sentencing. So I think it is important. Now, I don't know your personal situation, but, you know, I think that is important to know what you have done to rectify your situation. And, you know, and I agree, you know, I think our prisons are terrible, and I've asked and I support a new prison, not to put in more people, but to make it better for our prisoners that are there, to give them a chance at rehabilitation. You know, I don't want the overcrowding. It's you know, it's not good for anybody. Give us a new prison that has ample room for good rehabilitative drug treatment programs. That's what I asked for. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is this. In recent decades, the number of women caught up in the criminal legal system has skyrocketed. Many of these women struggle with substance abuse, mental illness, and are often victims of physical and sexual abuse. Incarcerating women, who are also mothers and caregivers, traumatizes families, driving the cycles of mass incarceration. How will you work to protect the health and safety of women in custody and facilitate their successful reentry back into our communities? You each have 1 minute. Stephen, your response.
Yes, I have been going for years to the women's facility to participate with Lauren Walker in her solution-focused classes and all the graduations. And they're doing some real healing at the women's prison. It has a totally different feel there, but almost everybody in there has been traumatized in the past. That has to be dealt with. There should be funding to pay for that kind of trauma treatment as there is in prison, but it should be expanded. But we should have the same funding to pay for people that are on probation, because they've been traumatized too. And drugs are involved in almost all of it. That's why, again, I'm so proud of Hope Probation, because people on probation succeed, women included, much more often on Hope Probation than on probation as usual. That helps them stay out of prison. Thousands of people have been successful on probation because they were in Hope rather than in regular probation. So I think it's important to do practical things that have actually worked in the past and expand their use. We even did a Hope pretrial pilot where the people in Hope pretrial got arrested for new crimes 42% less often. That should be
Thank you. Next, we have Jackie Esser.
Most women currently at the prison, are victims of trauma. Most have been sexually assaulted. These are all unresolved harms. And most of them are nonviolent, and most of them should be in our community. And most of the women who are currently at prison are failed Hope probationers or failed community supervision, not because they committed another crime, but because they kept using drugs. We weren't providing treatment. Every time they did use, we would send them to jail for a few days. We'd rip them apart from their families, their children, their job, because they used drugs. That's how Hope Probation works. It's criminalizing substance use disorder, and we're never providing treatment, which ultimately ends up these women at prisons. We need to support in reentry programs like Fernhurst, an amazing program that 86% success rate. We need more of these programs. We don't need more prisons, we need more Fernhurst. This is a program that succeeds 86% of the time. Our prison system is failing 54% of the time. It makes no sense. Stop investing in our prisons and jails, start investing in our communities, stop our women from going down this path of violence to begin with.
Next, we have Megan Cow.
A prosecutor's role is to objectively apply the criminal laws to people that violate the law. Any candidate that promises to do more than that is going to lead to corruption. A prosecutor cannot change the law. A prosecutor cannot promise all of these things. A prosecutor can only objectively apply the law. That being said, a prosecutor can also be a community leader, an inspiration to people, and can tell his or her story to encourage people to do better, to get treatment, and to live productive lives. A prosecutor should be a community leader, and it hasn't happened in the past because the role was very limited to the only three elected candidates. But going forward, I believe that the prosecutor can inspire people and can ask people to do better.
Thank you. Next, we have RJ Brown.
So I do agree with Megan. The prosecutor's role is to objectively apply the law and to do the job that we've been tasked with doing, which is to look at the facts, apply it, and sometimes make sentencing recommendations. I do believe the next prosecutor has the capacity to be an inspiration to help lead others, and that's going to be a necessary component of the job. But one thing I will say is that the prison system that we've got set up, it is structured so as to be punitive. And with that system, it's inherently destructive, and you're going to hurt people. And when you treat people like animals, that's the result that you're going to get, is people are not coming out in a better situation than when they went in. They're coming out with a high propensity toward recidivism. They're coming out with less incentive to right their ways. And so what I'd like to see, and what I would do is if I'm elected, is use my position to lobby for a therapeutic prison system. I have an obligation to get dangerous people off the street. I have an obligation to make sure that the public is safe. But once I've met that obligation, I don't see any value or any benefit in having a prison system that is treating people like animals. And so we need to reshift that system. We need to make it more helpful. We need to have it set up so that there are services that can get people back on their feet. And that's certainly something that I would do if given the opportunity.
Thank you. Next, we have Dwight Nakamoto.
Yes, I agree that our women that are in prison before they are released and set out into the community, because sooner or later they will be freed into the community, whether they max out or not. Prior to their release, they should be given types of programs, whether it be drug rehabilitation, or mental health court, or some kind of mental treatment. I totally agree with that, and I agree also that prior to them being released, there should be some kind of program like Furners or something like that, so it can be a step-by-step process. So yes, I don't think anybody should be released right away. I think it should be a step-by-step process and make sure that they get the proper programs that they need. And I would want a prison that can provide these programs. It is safe for everybody. It's safer for the public, and it's better for the prisoner or the woman.
And next we have Tai Kim.
Hello, thank you. The specific is this. We need to expand on treatment programs, rehabilitation programs, mental health facilities, mental health treatment, counseling. How do we expand on this? We gotta let the people know. When we talk about building more facility or relocating a current facility, communities are at uproar. They are opposed to it. They don't want a facility in their neighborhood. They don't know why. We need to spend more money into prison system. Community needs to be informed of what's needed out there to facilitate this rehab programs. Those are the specifics. We need to reach out to the people, let the people be aware, educate them, inform them of what's happening in criminal justice system and need for facilities that can help these people in custody so that when they're released, they'll be ready for it. Or when they're released, they'll get into these programs readily without having to wait around for it and possibly commit another offense. So we need to start with educating the people, get the people on board, and then let's take it up to the legislators and to fund them, to expand these programs. And that's what I propose.
Thank you. Now we've come to a very fun part of this forum. It's called a lightning round. We're going to ask a series of yes or no questions. When we ask each question and call on you, please say yes, no, or I don't know. You'll have 1 minute to elaborate on your response after the lightning round. We have provided the candidates with the questions ahead of time so that they would be prepared to answer them quickly and clearly. We'll be asking these questions in alphabetical order by first name. Dwight, you're up first. Would you support legislation so that possession of dangerous drugs in amounts under 2 grams would be classified as a misdemeanor offense?
No.
Okay. Next is Jackie.
Yes, it should be fully decriminalized.
Megan.
No.
RJ.
No.
Stephen.
No.
And Ty.
Yes.
Next question. Do you support evictions known as sweeps of unsheltered people in Honolulu? Dwight?
Yes.
Jackie?
No.
Megan?
Yes.
RJ?
It depends.
Stephen?
No.
Ty?
No.
Next question. Will you support legislation that funds mental health and social services over prioritizing policing and prosecuting in order to divert people away from the criminal legal system? Dwight?
I support both.
Jackie?
Yes.
Megan?
I support both as well.
RJ?
Yes.
Stephen?
Oh.
Ty?
Yes.
Next question. Do you support offering victims harmed by crime the opportunity to participate in restorative justice practices as an alternative to prosecution? Dwight?
Generally, yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Megan?
No.
RJ?
Not as an alternative, but as part of the process.
Stephen?
Yes.
Ty?
Always yes.
Thank you. Next question. Studies show that secured money bail is no more effective than non-secured money bail, and in fact can lead to devastating consequences for individuals and their communities. Will you commit to eliminating requests from your office for money bail as a condition of release? Dwight?
No.
Jackie?
Yes.
Megan?
No.
RJ?
Not elimination, but minimization.
Stephen?
Yes.
Ty?
Yes.
And this is the last question. Do you support ending qualified immunity for police? Dwight?
No.
Jackie?
Yes.
Megan?
No.
RJ?
It depends.
Stephen?
No.
And Ty?
Yes.
Okay. It's the end of the lightning round. Each candidate will now get 1 minute each for a follow-up to the lightning round questions. Dwight, you're first.
I believe that, basically that bail is just another tool that the judge has. The judge does not have to set bail. He can do away with bail. He can make it SR, he can make OR. And that is why I do not support doing away with cash bail. It is just merely another tool. Why would you want to take away another tool?
Next is Jackie.
And I just want to be clear, is this for all of the questions that I'm responding to?
Yes.
So yes, I said yes to make it a misdemeanor, but I support the full decriminalization of drug possession. We need people suffering from substance use disorder need treatment, not incarceration. As far as sweeps, absolutely we need to stop the sweeps and support housing for all people. As far as legislation for funds, whenever possible, for mental health and social services, whenever possible, we need to divert people out of the criminal legal system and provide them with services and prevent them from reoffending, which in turn makes our community safer. As far as restorative justice, yes, in my administration, all crime victims will be offered the opportunity to participate in restorative justice practices, which helps give crime victims a voice and enables rehabilitation. As far as money bail does not make us safer. It creates two systems of justice, one for the rich and one for the poor, and we need to eliminate money bail. Qualified immunity is a no-brainer. Ending qualified immunity means police will no longer have immunity to violate constitutional rights.
Thank you. Next is Megan.
I'd first like to note that these questions are not yes or no answers. These are issues that our United States Supreme Court, the most brilliant people in our country, have grappled over for over 200 years, writing opinions that are more than 80 pages longer. So to sit here and try to answer your question respectfully within a minute is very difficult to do. That being said, I'm going to try to address all of the questions that were asked. First is bail. In December of 2018, there was a recommendations of the Criminal Pretrial Task Force to the 13th Legislature of the State of Hawaii. It says that at present, however, there are insufficient alternatives to pretrial detention in the form of shelter and housing, substance abuse treatment programs, mental defendants who have reported housing, mental health, and or substance abuse needs with no structured plan to address their risks of failing to appear or recidivate. And therefore, there is no alternative currently to the bail system. So it is not feasible to get rid of the bail system at this time. I heard the bell.
Okay, thank you. Next is RJ.
Yes, I definitely tend to agree that these are not yes or no questions, and it's one of my deep frustrations with this entire process is that we're trying to dilute and simplify incredibly nuanced and difficult subjects, and it ultimately is leading, you know, we're not helping people by dumbing this stuff down. It is meant to be difficult. We are meant to grapple with these issues. Now that said, I do understand the nature of what we're doing here, and so I'm not trying to be overly argumentative, but it's a totally fair point by Megan. You know, on the legalization or the minimization of methamphetamine under 2 grams to a misdemeanor offense, yeah, we absolutely need treatment for people. But unfortunately, if you don't have it as a felony, you can't hold long-term treatment as a viable alternative. We need the carrot as the state to incentivize people. Hey, listen, we don't want to get you in prison. We want to get you help. But if it's not a felony, I don't have the tools at my disposal to get this person the actual sufficient help that they need. And so no. You know, lowering these offenses down to misdemeanors is not the right call, certainly not the legalization of all these types of dangerous drugs. What else? We got the sweeps. You know, I said it depends because ultimately there may be health and safety issues involved. It may be, you know, an altruistic humanitarian type mission to get people off the streets and get them into health. And so I can't just say blanketly that.
Thank you, RJ. Next is Stephen.
Yeah, first, I don't support making it a misdemeanor because the sad fact is, left to their own devices, people will not go to get treatment on their own and they won't persevere. It's too hard. I have helped thousands of people deal with their drug and alcohol issues, whether it's in drug court or in hope probation. And I'm a big believer in deferral so people can keep their records clean while they're trying to do that. But we definitely should be looking at research in the other states that have done it to see what that has led to, whether that's been helpful or not. I think that restorative justice, by all means, I've actually done that in my courtroom with restorative justice circles for people on probation. Money bail, cash bail discriminates against the poor, rewards the rich, and people don't get supervised. So once a new system is in place, but that means you have to have judges available to see people who've been arrested, and you have to have signature bonds available, and you have to have good supervision. The District of Columbia Pretrial Service Agency is a great model for this. And finally, qualified immunity, it definitely should be subject to statutory change so we can make it easier for citizens.
Thank you. Each candidate will now get 90 seconds to give their closing statement. Oh, sorry. The last is Ty.
Thank you. Okay, let me answer them real quickly so we can get to the 90 seconds closing. Dangerous drugs. If individual has drug issues, nothing else, drug issues, it should be treatment, not incarceration. Number 2, homeless people, when there are not enough shelters, where are they going to go? Are we going to just sweep them off and what, put them in prison? Against the sweeping. I'm against the sweeping. In terms of tools, not all tools are effective. Not all tools needs to be kept. A tool of cash bail, as Judge Alm had stated, is an outdated tool. It promotes socioeconomic disparity. it enhances in a large extent systemic prejudices. We need to get rid of cash bail. Well, jail is not just for the poor, and freedom is not for the rich. Thank you.
Thank you. Now each candidate will get 90 seconds to give their closing statement. The order of the closing statements were chosen at random. Megan Cowell, you're first up.
Thank you. I applaud all of the out-of-the-box thinkers that have run and announced their candidacy to run for prosecutor for Honolulu. But this is not what Honolulu needs right now. There has been an unsurmountable increase in crime, and criminals are not the same as they were 20 years ago. They're much more brave, they're much more brazen, and they're much more violent. They lack empathy. They will push down their kupuna just to steal $20 and leave them in the street to die. Everyone in the justice system has a role. It is the prosecutor's role to seek justice by objectively applying the criminal laws against anyone that violates them. It is the defense attorney's job to protect the defendant's constitutional rights, and it is the judge's role to maintain fairness and make sure that the rules are followed. It is the corrections division who is tasked with rehabilitating defendants back into society. My job as a prosecutor is to fight for the victim. If you choose to break the law, I will charge you, no matter your race, age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, it doesn't matter. I will be objective. I have taken the most aggressive position, yet the most objective position. Thank you.
Next, we have Stephen On.
As I said at the start, this election is all about restoring trust to the prosecutor's office. And I think given my 31 years of protecting the people of Oahu, helping victims get closure, and helping people with drug and alcohol problems and mental health problems to succeed and get their lives back, I'm the right candidate to do this. I also have the credibility of being I've been a supervisor in multiple ways. I've run offices. I can hit the ground running from day one. And this election is too important to have people try to learn how to be a supervisor on the job. I'm a huge believer in treatment, and Hope Probation uses treatment all the time. I never sent somebody to prison for repeated drug use. We always gave them a chance at treatment. Do your own research. Call up the treatment programs on the island, whether it's Ho'omaukeola, adult ATS, Hinamauka, Poilani, Habilitat, Santa Ana. Call them up and ask them what they think about Judge Allman, what they think about Hope Probation and Drug Court. And finally, working with communities to reduce crime, like we did with Weed and Seed in Chinatown and Kalihi Palama, making the streets safe for the people living there, and also keeping people from entering the system that don't have to. We'll expand to Ala Moana and then go into Waikiki. So thank you very much for this opportunity to address you.
Thank you. Next, we have Tai Kim.
Hello, this is Tai Kim. You know, Oahu is home to all of us, or most of us. I grew up in Kalihi and Kaneohe, graduated Casa High School, nominated to West Point by Native Hawaiian, Danakaka. I went to college here with the help of respected Japanese American. Myself and my brother went to law school. I got married here twice. I had 2 daughters, born and raised here. This is my home. This is my only home. This is the only place that I will live and probably die. I care about this community. I care about the home. I'm gonna protect this home safer, stronger, and more informed. I'm committed to public safety being stronger, strengthening our public safety, not convictions, but rehabilitations and preventions together with the people. We gotta inform the people. We gotta invite them to the office in open houses. We gotta invite other parts of criminal justice system to the prosecutor's office to work together, to work in concert, in addition to taking responsibility for each part's actions or inactions. Now, criminal justice system it's not doable by any single part. Can't be do it by judges alone, can't be do it by prisons alone. it has to be done by in concert with everybody, and people have to be involved. Now, having said that, I'm a firm believer. I'm a very firm believer that responsible behavior is a choice. It's a choice you make. But help has to be available for everybody that are in need of help, and they must receive help. Because of
Thank you. Next, we have Jackie Esser.
For the sake of our children and their children, we must end mass incarceration. We must stop investing in our jails and prisons and start investing in communities and education. This will not happen if we keep electing prosecutors who think the status quo is acceptable. Prosecutors who have been profiting from and entrenched in our current system and mentality that has led us to incarcerate thousands of our citizens and fail to make us safer. Kaneshiro was the prosecutor for 16 years. Carlisle was a prosecutor for 14 years. Everyone here tonight has been part of one of their prior administrations except for me. I am the only candidate who has been fighting this corrupt, unjust system we call justice. I'm glad that people are joining me at the table now and talking about much needed reform, but we need to fundamentally transform our system. I've been doing this my entire career. Who do you trust to get the job done? The people who have been part of the problem or the person who has been fighting for these changes their entire career? Join our movement, vote Jackie Esser, go to our website, esserforjustice.com. Aloha.
Thank you. Next, we have Dwight Nadamoto.
You know, ICE is our big problem today. Everything revolves on ICE uses. 2009, we had 37 deaths related to ICE in Hawaii. 2019, 129 alone in Honolulu. Our prisons are not full of small-time drug users. Our laws, since the last 20 years, have been getting less and less punitive. Once you get 20, now you can get probation. Drug use is apparently rising in Hawaii. Now is not the time to make less than 2 grams a misdemeanor. That is going to give the wrong message to the people. It's going to increase drug usage. It's going to increase addiction. It's going to increase crime, and it's going to increase deaths. You make it a misdemeanor, you cannot get to our specialty courts. They take much too long. And I have to disagree with Judge Alb. The 2018 National Institute of Justice intensive studies said home probation is no more effective than probation as usual.
Thank you. Next, we have RJ Brown.
You know, so we're all living through an era of extremes right now. When you look at the national politics, when you look at local politics, it's either hard right or hard left. You're either with us or you're against us. It's us versus them. It is becoming this unbelievably destructive mentality. You know, from the bottom of my soul, I believe that right now is the time to stride back toward the center, to some sense of moderation, to some sense of sobriety. Let's take the ideas that work. Let's reform the system where it's in need of reform. And there are absolutely a fundamental shift in the way that we do have a de facto priority for incarceration, that we have to pull back on that. We are doing more harm than good, and we're creating a less safe community when we are just having this knee-jerk reaction over and over again, this idea that you can be tough on crime and that you can just throw everyone in prison and think that that's going to solve the problems. It's not. At the same time, the solution here, with all due respect, is not to elect a defense attorney. You need a prosecutor. That's part of the system. That's how this thing works. It is an adversarial process. You want good, ethical, decent, honest prosecutors. You want smart, competent, zealous, dedicated defense attorneys, and you want a solid, neutral judiciary, because that is the only way that the system has any chance whatsoever of functioning according to the values that it aspires to function to. And right now, like, everyone's got their little piece. We've all got our little segment about why we think we're the best. Yeah, rah, rah, rah. Elect the right person with the right temperament. Elect someone who's going to do what is right, who has integrity, who believes in this process, who believes in the inherent value of people. And that's the direction that we need to go. And I hope to God that the voters understand that. And I just hope that they do their due diligence and put the work in to get this done.
Thank you, candidates. As a reminder to folks watching, people with felony convictions can still vote once they're out of prison and jail. People in jail pre-trial or convicted of misdemeanor offenses are not barred from voting, but most vote by absentee ballot. Make sure to register to vote online. We'll be dropping the links in the chat. And thank you to everyone who joined us over Zoom this evening. I'd now like to hand it over to ACLU of Hawaii's Smart Justice Campaign Director, Monica Espitia, who will close us out.
Hi, can you see me? Okay. Thank you to all of the candidates who participated and to you, the audience. We heard different points of views about how to move forward. And where does that leave us, you and me, the voters? It leaves us hopefully better informed with a greater understanding of what is at stake, questioning what it is we want from the prosecutors and our criminal legal system. Since 1981, there have only been 3 people in the prosecutor's job since it became an elected position. Think of the 80s and 90s and the tough on crime policies that came from that era. Policies that we now know do not work and were based on racist ideologies. Policies that destroyed families and devastated communities, namely Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. In Hawaii, this means Kanaka Maoli and Pacifica peoples who are disproportionately policed, arrested, and incarcerated. In Hawaii, 3 of 4 arrests are for nonviolent, non-property offenses. Most arrests are for crimes of poverty and homelessness, for substance abuse and mental health issues, things the criminal legal system handles very poorly. And get this, Honolulu is on the verge of building a new jail based on the model that gives a 60% recidivism rate and will cost over $525 million. That's $525 million. Paying this type of money to disappear human beings is not humane, productive, or smart. Holding people accountable should allow for a much broader, more sensible range of responses. You heard from our friends who have been deeply affected by incarceration. Though these stories rarely make the news, they are no less real or important. We are all a part of this community. Imprisonment is a brutal and costly response to crime and poverty that traumatizes incarcerated people and hurts families and communities. It should be the last option, not the first. By reducing our reliance on incarceration, we can invest the cost savings in schools, job training, stable housing, mental health, and substance abuse services, conflict mitigations. What if we invested in neighborhood revitalization projects that support small businesses and general quality of life for everyone? To the candidates, thank you for participating, and I ask that you listen to the groundswell that is happening. To the media, I ask that you hold those in power to account and that when reporting about crime, you not amplify the voices of power without context and caution. And to you, the audience, thank you for joining us. Please be sure to vote. Remember that Hawaii is now a mail-in ballot state. Ballots for the primary must be received by August 8th. Together we can bring smart justice to Hawaii. Please be sure to follow us on social media at ACLU Hawaii and our website, acluhawaii.org. Thank you and good night.